chilly.
All right. Good morning, everybody. Hope you are doing well. Ms. Yao, did we pay our heating bill this month? If you could check into that, that would be great. All right, so we have a briefing this morning from our outstanding Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services to receive a briefing on child welfare services. And so if we could please invite Ms. Buckland, Ms. Barnes, and Ms. Merkin to the table. Welcome. Appreciate you guys being here. So if you could state your names for the record and then jump right into the presentation, that would be great. Or Vivian, if you wanted to provide a little context.
All I was going to say is that these two programs are of the largest in the program area as well as the department, and these are overview briefings for the committee. You'll hear about the services as well as current service trends in the two programs, not just child welfare services, but the Office of Eligibility and Support Services. There's a couple of questions at the back of each of the packets, again around trends. One of the issues that I think that the committee's been concerned about over the years is the staffing of those programs and caseloads. And looking at the most recent vacancy report, again, that's still a concern that you may want to hear from the department about, how is that going, with the new HR system, and how are you ensuring that, things are moving forward.
Thank you, Ms. Yao. And thought it was important to get acclimated as both new chair, and HHS is such a large and important county agency that's very fluid and evolving. And so this is a great opportunity to check in and see how things are going and how we may be able to help.
So for the record, I'm Victoria Buckland. I'm the Acting Director of the Department of Health and Human Services. My part in this is easy today. I pretty much get to introduce my colleagues and turn it over into their able hands. As Vivian said, these are some of the largest programs, individual programs that we have in the department, and they are core in the social services space. So understanding these programs and how they work and the reach of them is important to kind of understanding the department as a whole. And I was very happy to see that these were some of the first ones to be briefed on because they are so central to the work of the department. So with me is Joanne Barnes, who's the Chief of Children, Youth, and Family Services, and Lisa Merkin, who's the Administrator for Child Welfare. This is an important partnership we have with the state, and I'm going to turn it over into their very able hands.
Good morning, Joanne Barnes, Chief of Children, Youth, and Family Services. I think all that needs to be said as an intro has already been said. I would just like to take one opportunity to introduce to you who's with us in the audience, our Acting Social Service Officer, who also serves as the Deputy to Children, Youth, and Family Services, Mr. Oscar Mensah. And Oscar has been a welcome addition to the team in the absence of our previous social service officer. He brings with him a lot of experience with the DHS programs, particularly in aging and disability services, but has been a really quick study in children, youth, and family services, and they know and respect him well at the state. So we're glad to have him with us. And I will turn it over to Lisa to get started.
Good morning. I am Lisa Merkin. I'm the Administrator for Child Welfare Services in Montgomery County. Thank you for having us. So I think we can just get started with the PowerPoint. We're starting off with our vision and mission, which really is to keep children and families safe in Montgomery County. That's what our staff is trained to do. That is what we do day in and day out. And so you'll see as we go through the PowerPoint, there are some numbers and some trends I'll speak about in terms of our front-end services, as well as our in-home services, our foster care numbers, our adoption numbers, and some of the things we see in our screening unit. So we do have a strategic plan. It looks at 4 main areas: best practice, a culture of permanency, which means that every child we serve, we want to have a permanent home. If it means getting the child back to their biological home, if it means to a custody and guardianship of a relative, or it means adoption. That is the goal of all of our work from the minute we get a call to the minute a case gets closed. Data strategy is really about some of the data we'll be looking at, using that data to help guide our work, to tell us where our vacancy needs are, where our caseload needs are, the trends we're seeing in the families that we're serving, and human capital and resources, as Vivian spoke about, how we best use our staff, how we get staff, how we retain staff. You know, child welfare, the bulk of our staff are social workers. They're licensed social workers. We're one of the only jurisdictions in the state that has licensed social workers doing all of our casework. But in all honesty, it can be a burnout field. You know, the families are complex, the work is challenging, and the life of a social worker in child welfare isn't always necessarily super long. So we look at what makes a worker stay, because we have some staff that stay for a long time, and we have others that don't. So we're really just beginning our work of why do people stay. This is probably easier to read on your page. This is what happens in child welfare, and it really shows the flow of the work when cases come in, where they come from. Any person can be a reporting source to our agency. Our screening unit is sort of the central hub of where we accept our calls, and then what happens when those calls get accepted for an investigation. They get an assessment. Do they go to in-home? Do the safety and risk factors of a family really cause us to pause to think a child needs to come into foster care rather than going back home or with a relative? And then what happens when a child does come into foster care, and that's our out-of-home services: foster care, adoption, kinship, transitioning youth, which is really another term for independent living. We have a number of youth that, for many reasons, cannot return home, and they go into independent living, and they stay with us until they're 21. Questions? So on our screening side, by state and federal law, there are guidelines of what types of cases we accept: physical abuse, neglect, sex abuse, or mental injury, which a lot of people term as emotional abuse. The state tells us what is the standard for us accepting a call to make it an investigation, and you'll see those are the definitions by law of what we accept in. You'll see in some of the future slides there's a category called non-CPS. Those are cases, for the easiest way for me to explain them is that we'll get a call, there's a concern, but it may not meet the standard of this law, but we feel like we have to respond to it. So we'll take it in as a non-Child Protective Services call to make sure that we have eyes and can do our own assessment of a family. Several years ago, there was a change in the state in terms of an investigative response, an IR versus an AR. And the difference is the alternative response model is more of a family engagement model, where rather than just going out to check on a family or interviewing a kid, we'll call the family and say, we got a report, this is what it's about. We'd like to set up a time to talk with you about what that information in the report is. There's no disposition. In an investigation, we have to make a finding. Did abuse or neglect happen? Did it not happen? In an AR case, we don't make a disposition. So it's about a little bit of a different way to engage. They're low-risk cases that get an alternative response case. Our sex abuse cases, our critical incidences, or our fatalities would never get an AR response. Those are always investigations. We tend to be one of the highest in the states. We take more than 50% of our cases as AR cases. If we get an AR case and we find that there are some more serious concerns, we can always change it to an investigative response. We're not bound just because we accept it as one response to keep it that response.
Right. And this is specifically around Child Protective Services. So obviously the results of this flow into everything else that happened.
And the one caveat I should say is people can't choose whether they want an investigative response or an alternative response. So we make the decision based on the level of risk and based on maybe some history as to what kind of response we're going to make. So someone can't call us and say, I think I'd like my case to be alternative response. That's not the way the law is set up. So now we're going to get into some data. Our assessment data is our front-end data. It's our screening unit and our investigations. you'll see that we do get a high volume of calls into our screening unit. Last year, we had a little over 18,000 calls in the fiscal year. We're seemingly on track to maybe do a little bit less than that this year. And then the other slide is a report on our investigations, and you'll see the difference between the AR, the IR, and the non-CPS cases. Our in-home services, so when an investigator completes their case, if there is a determination that there are still safety and risk factors in a family, and we don't feel comfortable closing it out or even making community-based services, which we do a lot, we will keep it in-house in our in-home family preservation unit. So this slide is a reflection of those numbers. We tend to stay somewhere between 80 and 100 on any given month. Those families tend to stay with us for 6 to 9 months, can be longer if the need arises, typically not less than 6 months though.
Absolutely. If my colleagues have questions through the presentation, please feel free to ask them.
I just wanted to go back to the IR versus AR and the chart, I think number 7, that showed one more, going back. So the new AR and the new IR, are there any underlying reasons for those differences?
The biggest underlying difference would be when we get a call, what is the allegation that's being made? So again, there's certain categories that wouldn't be an AR. The ARs tend to be a case where mom has 2 kids in the car and she goes to the CVS, it's pouring rain out, and she knows she's just gonna be a minute, even a CVS, she'll just be a minute. And it turns out not to be a minute, someone sees the kids in the car, it's pouring rain, maybe one of the kids was crying, and they call the police. And the police then report that to us. No history, mom just did what she thought was right in the moment. We're not gonna take that in as an investigation because there wasn't a meaningful, neglectful issue at hand. There really isn't a difference other than the intensity of what the call is.
And one thing to keep in mind is that we don't have options about whether to I'm sorry, thank you. One thing to keep in mind, we don't have options about whether to respond at all. So that call of the mom who went into the CVS, we can't just say, that's not a big deal, we're not doing anything. That avenue is actually not open to us. We do have to do something. And the alternative response gives us a mechanism to respond without that being an outright investigation.
Good, thank you.
In-home services. And then children and out-of-home care, slide number 9. These are our numbers of kids that are in foster care. There are total numbers, so this would also include our independent living youth. You'll see November 2018, we had a little bit of a dip, but I will tell you in December, January, and February, we are back up to close to 420 kids in foster care. I can't speak to why there was a dip in November. It was maybe an outlier of a month. What I will say is that the families that we are serving in out-of-home care are very, very complex, multiple issues, layers of complexity. Difficult to make safety plans when there are many issues at hand, and the result is that the kids come into foster care. The other trend that we're seeing is large family sizes. This month alone in February, and we're not done with the month, we have 3 families, 6 children apiece, all who have come into foster care. So when you look at 21 kids into foster care, it's not 21 single families or even 18 single families. Right now we have 4 families, 6 kids apiece, and the other one was a 3 children family, which puts a lot of pressure on the system, the court system, because all of these cases become court involved. A lot on the social worker, our community service aides who help us with the medicals and the dentals, all things that have to get done right away. The next slide is around out-of-home placement types. These are where our children that are in foster care are living. Foster care and treatment foster care is the largest percentage. Treatment foster care is a higher level of care. Those are our kids that are either medically fragile or kids that have a level of needs that typically can't be met in a typical foster home. So mental health issues, behavioral issues that we really need a higher level trained foster parent to manage. The county does have its own treatment foster parents that we train, and the state does as well. So we access both our locals as well as the state trained foster parents.
How is the recruitment of foster parents going? Is that fluid? Do we do better than other jurisdictions? Or
I am proud to say that we do a little bit better. So we do our own recruitment and retention. So it's not just keep getting the foster parents, it's how do we keep them? Because it's a high level job. They get a stipend, but they don't get paid to be foster parents. So we do information gathering for foster parents every single month, and we've taken our show on the road. So we've done it at community libraries, we've done it at some civic center to bring people from across the county in. We will license probably between 4 and 6 parents a month. But we will get 30 to 40 people to come to an informational session in any given month. The issue is when a foster parent closes because they've adopted a child, their home is now closed. Typically, they don't want to continue to foster after they've adopted. So we're always looking for new homes. We're always looking for homes for sibling groups, and we're always looking for homes for our older youth. Those are tough to place.
And I'll note that foster parents also can get a stipend for referring others. Mm-hmm. So, for a lot of parents, the idea of becoming a foster parent it's unknown and scary, and what's that likely to be like and stuff. And so we try to utilize the foster parents we currently have and incentivize them to talk to their own networks where they can speak with authenticity about what's the experience like, and all of that to help grow that. So there are a number of different mechanisms we pursue.
What is the stipend? How much is it?
It depends, but on a general foster care case, it's $835 a month per child. And that is to cover basic needs of the child. The department, of course, supplements that money for whatever the child's need is. For treatment foster care kids, it would be a little bit higher based on whatever that level of need for that child is.
Councilmember Rice.
So it's an interesting one because within this HHS realm, oftentimes we see that Hollywood and TV oftentimes shape what happens in our own communities. And so seeing to where we have a lot of shows and movies that highlight adoption, highlight foster parents, I'm wondering and I'm curious about the trends over the past few years, and if we haven't seen a slight uptick in terms of people who are thinking about these things, just as when it comes to mental health. Unfortunately, when we have a famous person who either commits suicide or something, or struggled with mental health, attempts suicide, whether we have these mass shootings that are attached to mental health, then everybody wants to talk about mental health. And so it's unfortunate that it is tied to these kinds of things, but we can also seize that opportunity to actually make a good thing out of it. And so certainly in this case, I'm curious as to whether or not we've seen some upticks with some of the recent, and I just take it from seeing different commercials beyond television shows and movies. Even commercials are featuring, and they're highlighting the fact that they have an adopted child as a part of their mix now and their familial structure. So everything is changing. So I'm curious as to whether or not you've seen that.
We have seen that. So when the movie last year came out, and I can't remember the name of that movie, I know you know what I'm talking about, we did see an uptick in the number coming to an informational session. And we'll ask, why are you there? Because some people are there with the kindest of hearts, but realize at the end of the informational session, fostering parenting is really challenging. It's not for them, but they're happy to be a part of someone else. So sometimes that social media blitz is a good thing, so we get more people interested. And then sometimes they realize it's not exactly what it's like in TV or in the movies. Yeah.
And following up on that, I know you haven't fully discussed this pie chart right now, but how many facilities or different out-of-home placement types do we have here in the county?
So we have about 200 foster homes active at any given time. Residential treatment centers are state-run centers, so we have RICA That's the big one in our area. Most of our kids that are in RTC may not be here because they might be at Shepherd Pratt, they may be at Brook Lane, Stonebridge, up north. Our treatment homes, we have 17 private treatment homes here, and then the others are scattered throughout the state. We try really hard to keep our kids in Montgomery County. Sometimes it's just not possible because the bed that they need and the needs that they have just can't be met in Montgomery County.
And you don't have to give me this information now, but if you could let us know, we're always talking about deserts, whether they're food deserts and the like. And so I'm curious as to whether or not, from a regional perspective, where the majority of our foster placements are. Because when I think about, as chair of the Education and Culture Committee, about trying to retain the stability for that child, oftentimes their school and that community is one in which it's very hard to then uproot and take them away. And I know that, I'd rather them have a stable home than just have a stable school. And so, certainly that is the priority. But if we could accomplish both, that's certainly, and I know that you try to do that, but I'm curious as to whether or not there may be some things that we can do on a regional scale to make sure that we're trying to outreach to families as well and individuals to let them know about that there's a greater need in those areas for folks to become foster parents. So, thank you.
Moving on. Children leaving out-of-home care. So when kids leave our system, this is where they are leaving to. So our largest percentage is reunification. Kids are being reunified successfully and safely with their families. Independence, those are kids that are aging out of our system at 21. Custody and guardianship, that they are living now with a relative. 19% are adopted, and 3% are others. And others means either they got their case closed because we have some youth that at 19 decide, I don't want to be in the system anymore. And although the department doesn't support that, the judge very well may. We have, unfortunately, 1 or 2 that may be incarcerated at the time. That's that 3%. I will tell you this year, by the time we end our year, we will have more than 30 adoptions finalized, which is our highest number in probably the last 10 years. The next slide is something we started to look at last year, and these are the reasons of when a child comes into care, looking at what's called the shelter care petition. So this is the information that when we go to court that next business day, these are the reasons of why they're coming into care. So it's actually the next 2 slides. We have more neglect cases going to court than we have physical abuse cases. You'll see drug abuse of the caregiver is a large factor.
Amount.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that they're co-occurring.
Yes. So you'll see the numbers will not add up.
Right.
Anywhere, no matter how you try.
Right.
That it usually is. Kids don't come into foster care for really typically just one reason. It's really, our biggest 3 are substance abuse, in no given order: substance abuse, domestic violence, and mental health of either a child or a parent, or sometimes both.
Again, just because we've had these issues in my up-county region primarily as well, I'm curious from a regional perspective as to where the children are coming from and the numbers. So I'm not sure if you have that information broken down like that, but that would be incredibly helpful as well, because it also helps us to identify and start to, if we're seeing that a number of kids in District 2 are entering the foster care system because of domestic violence and because of drug abuse, then we know that's some of the things that we can also focus on in that area where it's a highlight, where in District 1 it may be something else, a child's disabilities or whatever rises to the level. So again, I think it would be helpful for us to drill down on this information a little bit more to get some more of the specifics that will help us to try and get at some of the other underlying root causes of some of these issues.
We have begun doing some geomapping of this, and one of the things we found really interesting in the last fiscal year, whereas previously we saw a lot of kids coming out of the Germantown zip codes and Lower Silver Spring in foster care, we're not seeing that many kids coming into care from Lower Silver Spring. The new biggest zip codes in relative terms is 28850 Rockville, which was a really big surprise to us. So we're just now trying to drill down to addresses and actual neighborhoods to see, is there such a thing as a neighborhood where the kids are coming from? So I'm happy to share what we have so far, and it's very interesting to us as well.
And I do want to give a call out to the Office of the County Attorney, who works hand in glove with us throughout all of these processes, and without whom this work couldn't really function the way that it does.
Thank you. Yeah. The second part of that slide is when you look at the drug types. So if you look at what parents are using that's causing their children to come into foster care, marijuana and cocaine. And also, these will not add up to 100 because sometimes it's more than just one drug. And this was the same, very similar numbers in FY17. The next slide talks about our collaboration with MCPS. Just as closely as we work with the county attorney, we work side by side with MCPS day in and day out. We have worked with them for the last several years around their recognizing and reporting child abuse for their staff. So if you were to look at our screening numbers from 2016, we had many, many calls coming into child welfare that didn't need to be called in, but we found that to be a reflection of people were just calling in everything, whether or not it was tied to abuse or neglect. That's really settled down. So our numbers in screening have come down a little bit as a reflection of that. We do work with MCPS for their clearances. Every staff person in MCPS has to be cleared for child welfare history, so we have worked collaboratively with them to get that work done. And this past year, starting first semester, is we developed a data platform with MCPS. And it is a data platform that looks at how our foster care youth are doing academically, because we know countrywide research shows that kids in foster care do not do as well academically, nor do they graduate and do they go on to college at the same rates as their peers. So we really wanted to do a preventative search and work around trying to get to those kids before there is a problem. So we have our first set of data. It's not a lot of data because it's 300 plus kids, to look at how do we intervene earlier. And so there's a protocol, there's a process that we work with the PPWs around getting to those kids and developing individualized plans with those kids when we see PPWs, before we get to, before this, PPW, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm like, didn't I say that? I'm sorry, pupil personnel workers, I'm so sorry, with the school, that we develop an individualized plan to help those kids when we see problems arise and catch them before it's second semester, mid-semester. Now the graduating senior is not going to pass math and won't graduate. We don't ever, ever want that to happen. Partnerships, this is a list of just a few. So we have many, many partnerships. And we really do rely on our community stakeholders to help this work. I say it to our staff, and I'll say it here, is that our work it's a village-style model, that we cannot do this work and work with these families without the help of the county attorney, the school systems, all of our community-based partnerships, our crisis center, our health and human service partners. It really does take all of us to keep families safe and keep them safe when they leave our system. I will make a short comment about the Treehouse Child Assessment Center. We work closely with them. They do all of our work around forensic interviewing of kids. There's a forensic pediatrician on staff that sees our kids as well, and that's a very, very important piece of our work in our investigations.
Couple of questions on this slide. So as the former director of the Recreation Department, I want to commend your office because I saw firsthand, we referred a number of cases, unfortunately, with the thousands of youth that Recreation served. But one thing that I think can be improved is information sharing among these various agencies, particularly within MCPS and other county agencies who may be working with these youth, because there were situations that would arise that had we had a little bit more background and information, we could have better prepared for. So I don't know, obviously you guys are stretched and it is such difficult work to begin with, but you really are sort of that middle agency within county government that can maybe connect those dots. We received phenomenal training from your staff in advance of our camp season every year, but I think there are a number of other agencies that could benefit from a similar training and a facilitation of a meeting at some point in the near future of all those agencies that do serve more disproportionately vulnerable populations, I think would be productive and helpful. I was so excited to see this particular briefing, but there are a number of other agencies who are involved in this work that would benefit from hearing all the services that your office provides.
We would be happy to do that, because we will do community outreach to anyone who's interested in what we do and how it affects the clients and the populations they serve.
That's great. And then the other thing, in anticipation of trends, so as we learned during the shutdown, when economic situation of families started to get dire, we heard reports of increased calls, increased cases, and not surprisingly, economic challenges, there's a direct line between that and then leading to family challenges. So we do anticipate a recession sometime in the near future. The only question is just how bad it will be. Do you notice those trends further in advance, going further upstream, and then to the degree to which you can begin preparing for the inevitable challenges that come with economic hardship among families?
I agree with everything that you've said. We did not see an uptick from this past, was it now 6 weeks ago, but we do expect that if we go back into a full recession, that we do see an uptick, and we do start preparing our staff and our screening unit about staffing patterns and caseloads, and really monitoring that closely so that we are able to manage that. Whether it means reassigning some staff to do the front end work, we are prepared to do that as well.
That's great. And then I remember vividly there were a couple of particular cases that left a deep impact and scar on my staff, who were not trained or equipped to process what they had observed and had heard from these 7- and 8-year-old children. And so I am very sensitive to how difficult this work is, but how do we promote health and wellness among the staff? How is that done, and is there an opportunity there to do more?
So, very good question. I'm glad you asked. I don't think that was included in here. So we actually have a health and wellness committee within child welfare. We do a lot with the counties, live well, but we also do our own internal work, and we actually have some staff, I wouldn't call them contractors in place, that actually do post-traumatic debriefings with our staff. They can do them individually. We just had a full day one for our staff that for new workers it's mandatory. For others that we strongly encourage them to go. We try to do one at least quarterly, because we recognize that even if you say it doesn't bother me, there's no way it can't get ingrained into what you see and what you hear and how you do your work.
And thank you. And then the other thing we observed in some of the cases I saw firsthand was, within certain cultures and communities, speaking up is not what you do. In fact, it's discouraged. And with what we're seeing at the federal level right now, and discouragement of people accessing any sort of public benefit, there's a cultural training aspect of this that's very important. And so how is that handled within your guys' office? The obvious is language, that's important, but going even further than that in acculturation training, what do you do there?
So as part of our CQI, our Continuous Quality Improvement from several years ago, we have some standing committee works. One is the health and wellness. We do one around stakeholder and community support developments, and we also have a cultural competence committee that's kind of changed over the years. And what we do now is when there is a case that is sort of outside of what our learning may be, is who do we reach out to learn about what that culture may be, what those practices may be, so we can better understand before we engage a family if time allows. Some of it's as basic as language and that, but more of it is now around the county's so diverse and keeping up with what the county's needs are and the families that we're seeing. How do we keep up as well?
Is that culture done, the training done in-house, or do you do?
Well, usually
contract that out with a provider?
we more times than not contract that out. If we can use internal, we do, but sometimes we can't.
Okay, thanks.
Really very quickly, Families Blossoms, which is the working title to really our Title 4E funding.
And Title 4E funding is?
Title 4E funding is is the federal reimbursement for cost of when kids come into foster care. And several years ago, with the decrease of kids that were coming into foster care, there was this money. So what do you do with this money is put it toward prevention services. So that was really what these three, the state asked each county to develop their own plan of what they saw they needed. So we identified 3 needs. One was substance abuse. So we actually have 2, well, we had 3, but we have 2 now. Substance abuse interventionists or licensed counselors that are embedded in our staff that work along with our social work staff to work with the families that have substance abuse issues. The primary focus is how do we keep that family safe so the kids can remain in the home. Transitioning Youth Learning Collaborative is a learning collaborative made up of almost 40 stakeholders to work on how do we best help our kids age out of the system. Because at 21, most 21-year-olds really are not ready to go off in the world and be on their own. And these kids almost always have a history of trauma. So how do we do that successfully for them? And then our transition trauma therapist. We realized several years ago that with all the work our social work staff does when a removal has to happen is we did not feel we were giving enough time to the actual trauma experience of the youth being moved from their home into a new home. So we have trauma therapists, we work closely with the treehouse that work particularly with, it's assigned to that child or the sibling group when a removal has to happen. And the only job that therapist has is to help that child through the removal process. If it means being with them through the night, if it means being with them in court, they are with that child to help them through that period and then do a soft warm handoff to the therapist. Because almost all of our kids will get a therapist, and we want to make sure that transition is smooth. And then the last slide are some of our initiatives for this year coming into FY20. Families First Prevention Act, which is going to be a very different way of us doing child welfare because there's a lot more emphasis on prevention, while we're also looking at making sure our foster care system is as strong as it can be. CJAMS, if anyone's heard of CJAMS, that is our state database system that's replacing CHESI, Child Juvenile Adult Management System. We are in the testing and training work with the state right now with the hope to be live. Montgomery County goes live hopefully in July. And our START model, which is an evidence-based practice model to do additional work with our substance abusing families, and again, trying to keep those families intact while the parents are being served and keep the kids safe.
Councilmember Rice.
Well, if you wanted to get to challenges, because my question is regarding that, so you want to just go through those last 2 bullet points.
So our challenges. So child welfare, our agency does all of this child welfare clearances for anyone who needs them. Camp, pre-adoptive resources, private providers, people that are mentoring programs. So our volume is fairly high. We tend to do almost 5,000 clearances in a given year. We seem to be on track right now for that number. It's a challenge because we do not have a dedicated staff person to do those clearances. So those responsibilities are spread amongst our administrative staff to complete.
So I'll pick up there where you left off. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Because I think that that's one of the concerns as we go into budget. But I'm going to step back a minute because I think that one of the things that struck me about one of the slides that you had was about substance abuse, and the leading substance abuse was marijuana. And I'm not going to get into a political debate about marijuana, but I will say this, that what we're talking about is drug abuse, not about drug use. And there's a difference. And it's just like alcohol is a drug, and people consume alcohol every day and do it responsibly and don't abuse alcohol. But then there are folks who also do abuse alcohol, and then it becomes an issue with being able to care for children. And so from that perspective, it's concerning to me seeing that being the leading cause and then seeing the direction that Maryland is headed in without having anything there to be able to ensure that these kind of numbers don't fly off the rails. And so that's kind of where my concern is when it comes to the START model, which I think is great for us to start doing. But if we don't have the staffing that's there, knowing that there's going to be an uptick as we continue to see the availability of this drug that people could then abuse, and then that then becomes a way in which with drug abuse, they're not caring for their children, means more children in our systems, or at least more impetus on us to have more workers that are helping our families to get through and get back to sobriety. So just talk to me about what we're seeing, because I know that we're seeing an uptick in usage throughout the community as a whole. We hear it from our police and from others in our healthcare community, and how you're planning to do that with the staffing that you currently have.
So right now we have our substance abuse interventionists, and of course we have our county partners for substance abuse and recovery. The START model, the difference with the START model is there's a greater level of intensity in a given identified family with a peer mentor. And we have not done the peer mentor model before, so that's a big change for us, is there's a peer mentor as well as a substance abuse recovery person as well as a social worker that are working with that family on an individualized plan to get them into treatment and through treatment. I will tell you one of the struggles that we have is marijuana because, and I know I'll speak for the courts, is because we have a lot of families that will have a medical marijuana card. And how do you test and how do you know that there's use versus abuse and how that impacts what's going on in that family? So typically when we see marijuana, it's not always just marijuana, it's usually marijuana with other choices of drugs. Some prescriptions, some not, which again, not surprising, is a struggle for us because people will come in with a prescription. It's very hard for the judge to say, well, it's a good prescription, but we know there's something else going on with that prescription because X, Y, and Z happened as a result of that parent not being able to take care of their kids. So it's something that we are trying to be on top of in terms of when we get a family that substance abuse is an identified factor, risk factor.
Now, I noticed that you had about 20 vacancies in social workers, is that correct? And so how does that impact not only your ability to provide the existing services that you have, but for beginning this new START model and other kinds of programs like that?
So the START model is actually coming through the state. There are 11 jurisdictions. We're one of them that are going to be using this model. So the money for the peer mentor will come through state dollars. Okay. And some of the other necessities, client-based services will come through state monies. For vacancies, it does impact us because any vacancy means there's one less social worker carrying a caseload. We just finished a hiring blitz, for lack of a better term, of where we did just 2 or 3 days of straight interviews, hiring, selection memos. I look forward to the spring. Our graduating MSW students are always our best hires. We have partnerships with Howard University as well as the University of Maryland School of Social Work and Catholic University where we do some heavy recruitment come this spring because we know that they're looking for jobs, they need jobs, and we need them to come to fill our jobs. So that will be another large hiring chance for us as well.
And so with that most recent hire, you're still 20 down?
No, the 20 is made up of all of those position selection memos that are pending.
Okay.
We don't have many vacancies that don't have something going on with them, a selection memo pending or an offer being pending.
Okay. And then one of the things that the chair had spoken about before when it comes to making sure that the skills of those individuals are ones that can certainly meet the needs of our community, and speaking a wide variety of languages as we see in our communities of color, especially in our Asian communities, in our Hispanic and Latino communities, and in some of our African immigrant communities. And so I would just encourage you to try and ensure that we're looking at those particulars and those skill sets. I know that you are, but just want to put that plug in. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Absolutely.
No problem. Following up on my colleague's good line of questioning along questions that I had, so I'll just drill down on one specifically. Regarding the hiring, you've identified pools of applicants, which sound very promising. Is the challenge in finding those applicants, or are you also finding challenges within the county's HR procedures to bring them on board in a timely manner?
So I'll take that one. There are obviously a lot of positions that are out there. Child welfare, as Lisa said, is a very challenging space to work in. You know, I remember hearing at some point someone say, you know, no one ever entered child welfare because they had a happy story, right? And so you're dealing with those day in and day out. There are a lot of social work positions in the department, and you know, we work at having people go into this particular line of work given how critical it is. We always are on the lookout for people to fill those positions. So, you know, Lisa and her team do a great job of forming partnerships and stuff, but there are always opportunities. So we always welcome additional pools of applicants. In terms of actually bringing those folks on board, there are always two pieces to the hiring process. There's a piece that's on our side, and there's a piece obviously that's in central OHR. We've done a lot of work, and I really have to hand it both to Lisa and to Yvonne, who you'll hear from later, who have done a huge amount of work trying to streamline our side of that equation as much as possible. You know, this blitz that they just did is one of those where they were interviewing for all across child welfare services. And we are actually getting good applicant pools out of the new system. That's actually been positive for us. But once those selection memos are made, then it is a matter of the onboarding process and getting the offers made and all the rest of that. And, you know, if I could wave my magic wand, I would have that go faster. Mm-hmm. And that is not something, I don't have a wand that does that, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, here in the county with the new leadership, we will be having a new director of the Office of Human Resources, and we can certainly bring that to that person's attention.
The other thing I will point out on the personnel side is that most of the funding in this area does come from the state through the House bill grant. Foster care monies themselves are a mix of federal and state dollars. We actually do pay attention to that on our side because it makes a difference at the state level being able to draw down federal dollars. Payments to foster care families themselves are actually made by the state. We work in the state system. There are some things that we do locally, but there's a lot of that we do on behalf of the state in the state systems. And for all of those reasons, when you're asking about economic downturn and what happens if we have a spike due to changes in marijuana laws and things like that, those are negotiations we end up having with the state because we aren't the only jurisdiction that's likely to see effects at that point. The state at that point is going to need to really look at what happens statewide with those trends. We do have a memorandum of understanding with the state that allows us to do that work on their behalf. Part of that MOU speaks to that very issue of if other locals are seeing increases because of demand and stuff, that we are supposed to be at the table there as well. So that's part of our challenge, is to make sure that we end up being at the table and really representing here are the trends we see locally, so that we do get that state support.
Thank you.
Thank you. we should be promoting foster care year-round, but is there a particular month where there's a push nationally that we may be able to, if we aren't already drawing down from?
So April is Child Abuse Prevention Month, so we do something around then. We do something in March, because March is Social Work Month. And then in the fall, we do some events around foster, to acknowledge and our foster parents. So in the fall, yeah.
I think our faith-based community in particular, Reverend Caseman has done fantastic work building trust within our faith-based organizations who have over and over again asked us how they can help. And I think this is one area where I know there are loving families that are out there who are in a position to help. And so this would be another opportunity. So I'd like to encourage us to work with the Office of Community Partnerships and Reverend Caseman in particular, leading up for March and April.
We had some initial conversations with him and Community Ministries around at least getting some of our brochures to some of their meetings and some quick presentations just about if you want to learn how to be a foster parent, come and learn. So we'll further work on that.
And then this is a more of a general question, but I think that we do a relatively good job connecting a very complex system. But families that are in crisis, depending on how they enter into the system and who they talk to, our office got involved in a case recently regarding a woman, which I know is just one of, I believe, 400 similar cases, and so it's just an overwhelming issue. But what we found when families are in crisis like this, the pass-off between departments, agencies, organizations is not always very smooth. And so I love the fact that we have licensed social workers who are handling the case management, because that is so critical, but I don't know it's something that we can tackle right now in this particular session, but I would like to map as families who are in crisis and come through your guys' offices, where the connections are across the entire county and within the system, because I know the state is even involved at some point with some of these particular cases, and how we collectively can build a more cohesive system, whether it be information sharing, whether it being creating capacity with an organization so there's more time and space for people to be able to coordinate services. It just feels like there's something missing. And I know we're doing the best job that we can and a good job, but it feels like there's a little bit more that we can do in terms of general overall coordination.
Yeah, there's, coordination in a department as complex as HHS is always a challenge. There are a number of deliberate partnerships that child welfare in particular does on a routine basis. In addition to that, they obviously work inside the state systems, but they actually do have access to our integrated case management system precisely so that they can see where else a family is connected or whether a family is connected or isn't connected and should be, so that they have as much information as they can at their fingertips so that they know exactly what's happening with that family.
Great. Well, I can't thank you enough for your work.
Thank you.
Do you have another question?
I just had one comment along the lines of what you were talking about in terms of expansion of the awareness. I was at Starbucks yesterday at Germantown Town Center and saw Treehouse being advertised. And so partnering with our corporate folks, you guys are doing a great job of doing that and highlighting it. So it was interesting that I just saw it yesterday right before this meeting, but I'm curious as to how that outreach went, and are you doing this as a much larger marketing campaign to those as a whole, or is it just Starbucks? Or
So, interestingly, I'm so glad you said something, because we just started that during the holiday season, we'll get a lot of calls from community people, organizations, agencies that say, how can I help? So we really do try to engage them and then keep them. So Starbucks was one that the manager reached out to us and said after the holidays, and they were very, very generous with us during the holiday season, Thanksgiving and Christmas and Hanukkah, is how can we continue? So we worked with the Treehouse, and they're our point person, and we let them know what we need, and that's how that basket came. So we've gotten our first drop of our basket. So I don't know if that was filled or empty, but I'm anxious to know.
Oh, it was filled. It was filled.
Great,
It-
yeah.
It was
So
great.
so that's been really, really a great. So we do look to continue to build those. We have some relationships with 4-H Rotary clubs that also help us throughout the year. We tend to gravitate to the holidays because that's when people, whether it be the spring holidays or the fall holidays or the winter holidays, where people are most wanting to help, and so we don't ever turn anyone away.
Right, that's awesome.
And the thing I'll close on for us, obviously, like I said, people don't enter child welfare because they have happy stories, but there are two events in particular that if you've not had a chance or would like to have a chance to attend, that I would encourage you to attend. One is we do a ceremony in the spring, for our children that have graduated from high school. That's extremely lovely. And then Adoption Day. The court is a totally different place on Adoption Day than it is at other times. And I will encourage you to experience that. They are some of the highest points in what is otherwise a really tough job.
Wow. Joanne?
I'd just like to close by letting our two new council members know that before this committee in the past, we brought the issue of the treehouse. It is no longer an HHS program. That program was transferred over to an independent nonprofit. We still work very closely with them. We have 3 staff that are dedicated to be liaisons with them. They are in our space, so it would be invisible to anyone receiving services, but they are now a standalone nonprofit.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, let's move on to the last item on the agenda. This is a briefing regarding our Office of Eligibility and Support Services. Ms. Buckland and Ms. Barnes want to stay at the table, and Ms. Iskandari could join us. Hello. Vivian, any context you want to provide for this presentation, or want to jump right in? Right.
And I will give my regrets. I actually have a personal appointment that I must get to, so I'm going to leave you in very, very capable hands.
Great. Thanks, Ms. Buckland. Hello.
Good morning, Council Chair and Council members. My name is Yvonne Iskandari, and I am the Administrator for the Office of Eligibility and Support Services as Health and Human Services. And I am honored to be here this morning to talk about the Office of Eligibility and Support Services. Now, the Office of Eligibility and Support Services is integrated with 3 other program areas, and this was even prior to my tenure here at HHS. Somewhere about 2011 and 2012 was a merge between the income supports area, healthcare eligibility, and special medical assistance service areas. And those were combined to become the Office of Eligibility and Support Services. And you can see that we provide services to help support our low-income residents in the county in very critical areas with food, cash assistance, medical assistance, and child care subsidy. We have a total of 12 programs that we determine eligibility for within the county. This slide just shows how we are situated in terms of our acting director, Ms. Buckland, Chief John Barnes, Mr. Dr. Oscar Mensah, acting social services officer, and myself. The next slide shows how OESS is broken down. Oftentimes people know that we have caseworkers that do the work, but there's so many other components within OESS, and that is housed in our central unit, where we have a Pregnant Women and Children grant. We have appeals for all of our programs, program integrity, overpayments, compliance, quality assurance, training and development and policy, and Suburban Washington Resettlement Center, where we provide services to refugees and asylees. We also have within our Calhoun office, which we call our administrative office, that has a child care scholarship program and the Working Parents Assistance Program, employment services and temporary cash assistance for families, and the Neighborhood Opportunity Network. And then we have a specialized medical assistance that's housed at 401 Hungerford that provides eligibility for long-term care institutional nursing homes, for outreach, which behavioral health and mental health components within the clinics in the county, for hospitals in the county that provides medical assistance, and we also have our public assistance to adults. And we have our 3 regional offices, which most people are familiar with. The one in Down County in Silver Spring. We have 2 locations there at 8818 Georgia Avenue and at 8630 Fenton Street. We also have our Rockville offices at 1301 Picard Drive and 1401 Rockville Pike. And then we have our integrated service area in Up County, Germantown. In OESS, we have 268 county staff, and we have 6 staff who are state staff that are family investment aides. Again, for us in OESS, we are the subject matter experts in determining eligibility for our public assistance, federal, state, and county programs. We have a no wrong door policy. We provide multilingual services. Earlier, we talked about having an integrated set of staff that would provide services to the diverse populations within the county, and we ensure in our hiring practices that we are doing that. To the extent that we don't have staff who can speak any of those languages that a customer may come in with, we also have the language line that we can connect customers with, and we are able to assist them. So everybody is served within our offices. In FY18, we had 24 outreach events that our staff attended, reaching over 1,000 residents in the county. 11 of them were at county public schools, mostly through at the back to school nights where we had staff who attended, and we are able to assist customers with educating them about our programs and also determining eligibility for some of those families. We had 6 other events within HHS and 19 at community-based organizations. We primarily work with the state, and so state affiliations are with the Department of Human Services for all of our public assistance programs, the Food Supplements Program, which is the SNAP program, and temporary cash assistance, temporary disability assistance program for individual adults, and public assistance to adults. Within the Department of Health, we have our Medicaid programs. The MAGI programs, which is the Medicaid Adjusted Gross Income, which is, it's a mouthful, and it's programs under the Affordable Care Act that provides the extended Medicaid to individuals and families. And then we have non-MAGI Medicaid programs, which are what we traditionally know as our age blind and disabled programs. And then, of course, our long-term care, which provides eligibility to folks in a nursing home. At the Department of Education, we have the Child Care Scholarship Program, formerly the Child Care Subsidy Program. So those are state affiliations. Our general requirements for eligibility for our federal and state programs is that each candidate is tested to meet technical and financial eligibility requirements. And those technical requirements include they have to be residents in the state of Maryland, they have to meet citizenship and immigration status, the age, whether they're disabled, the household composition, and looking at whether they are engaged in work activity. Generally, these programs do not serve undocumented applicants. However, there's an exception for emergency Medicaid. And so for our pregnant women, program provides eligibility for labor and delivery. And also when an individual who is an undocumented immigrant has what's considered as an emergency situation, then they are reviewed by the state contractor to determine whether that service is covered as an emergency, and the state will provide those benefits to cover those needs. So with this, the next few slides talk about all of the state, federal, and federal programs, beginning with the supplemental nutrition assistance programs. And in the essence of time, I will just really give some highlights of these programs. As you can see, for supplemental nutrition assistance programs, all of our programs for that matter, we are above the required compliance rates of 96%. We are way above that. And you would see that for the SNAP program, 50% of recipients reside in 7 zip codes within the county. And in FY19, you're looking at the caseload sizes. You see that children under 19 make up 47% of the recipients of SNAP, and seniors age 60 and older make up 16% of the recipients. For temporary cash assistance, you see that concentration is at 4 zip codes within the county. I'm going to go to the Magi Medicaid slides. For the Medicaid slides here. And for medical assistance through the Affordable Care Act, you see that in FY18, yes, in FY18, we served 151,761 residents in the county, and to date in FY19, we have exceeded that number. Our non-Magi cases also continue to, we continue to serve these individuals who are age blind and disabled, and then our long-term care institution cases, we see that they remain steady around 1,900. Child care scholarship program at the state. We are aware that the state increased their income level and the rates for providers back in May, and the income levels increased in August. And so that created a situation where we had to transfer a number of residents into the state subsidy program. But as of October, you see the numbers. We had 1,884 active cases that was made up 1,933 children. And the majority of these children were transferred to the state subsidy program. Now for our county programs, the Working Parents Assistance Program, as we all know, has been serving a number of residents who are now transferred to the state. And so we have now repurposed the program to becoming more of a supplement program. and you see the number of children we serve within the supplements program, while we continue to serve the remaining children in the WPA. The remainder of our county programs are healthcare programs, the care for kids, maternity partnership, and senior dental. Now, how do residents apply for our programs? There are a number of ways that residents could apply for our programs, most of which is online, through MyDHR for the family investments programs, MD Think for our long-term care. This is the state's new eligibility and enrollment system that the state started off with long-term care. And at the end of FY19, going into 20, the state is looking at transitioning to this new system for all of its family investment programs. And then for our Medicaid, we do use the Maryland Health Connection system. These are all online systems. We also do accept applications on paper for those residents who still prefer to do paper applications. We welcome those applications. We also accept applications by mail. We accept them by fax. We accept them by email. We also have a new queuing system within our offices that has tremendously enhanced our lobby engagement and reduced wait times for our customers. All of our offices have self-service labs for Maryland Health Connection residents who apply. And then now we also have our self-service labs for our income supports programs in 2 of our offices. And the one in our Germantown office is on the way. And we hope to have that by April. What that has done is really assisted those customers who can come in and just need a little guidance to complete their application. So we have staff in the labs who would assist those customers, but most of the work is done by the customers themselves. In order to serve our customers, we also extend eligibility services through our network, our neighborhood network services. And we have staff in hospitals and clinics across the county, and our mental health and behavioral facilities at the Suburban Washington Resettlement Center on Colesville Road, at the Ethiopian Development Center, also ECDC on Silver Spring, and neighborhood opportunity networks in 4 different locations across the county, at Worksession Montgomery, in the corrections facilities. So we try to reach people everywhere they are. Not that they have to come to us, but that we are also reaching them out to them in the community. Currently in FY19, given that we are the experts in eligibility determination, we are in the process of transitioning to additional eligibility programs to OESS, and that's the connector entity, which is the second arm of the Affordable Care Act, and Montgomery Cares, which is also a county program that helps provide health care for the uninsured adults. Some of our accomplishments over the past year for our temporary cash assistance families, we have been able to get families or parents to get jobs at $14.23 an hour. The state requires $10 an hour, so we continuously surpass this. And we have the highest work participation rate across all jurisdictions. Although this number still includes the long-term disabled population, so we struggle to meet the 50% mark. Nonetheless, Montgomery County continues to be at the top of that. We are very proud of our Reading and Education to Advance Life program across our regional offices that is in partnership with the JCA Human Interages and with the Montgomery County Public Library. In FY18, this program was awarded 3 national awards. We have contributed 1,080 volunteer hours, distributed 1,347 books to children. Children continue to want to take these books home. As a matter of fact, we have increased the number of hours for the volunteers in our offices, and we are looking to expand even to other offices. We have successfully shifted to phone interviews for most of our cases, and that's the preference of our customers who, again, our expectation is that people want to engage, they want to work, and so we want to accommodate them to the best of our ability. So if it's convenient for a customer to do phone interviews, that's what we do. And so that has also helped to reduce the traffic in our lobbies, in our regional centers. And I already talked about the customer-assisted labs that we have at 5 locations. QLess is also one of our successes that we've now done for over a year, going into our 2nd year. And this allows us to get live data on what's going on in our offices. So if you do visit our offices, you will see the reduction in the wait time for customers, because our supervisors and managers monitor the queues to see what's going on. Customers are happy. We've received a lot of good feedback from customers about this new system. I actually remember when we first launched it in the Germantown office that morning, where customers were so delighted and, you know, just felt like this was a great thing. I was planning to wait for probably up to an hour, and it was 20 minutes and they were gone. And so this is really has been a successful implementation. Overall, our appeals for our cases have reduced drastically, and that's because of the intentional work that we do to ensure that our cases are correct, that we explain to customers even when they are not happy with decisions, but that we are able to explain to them the reason for a decision. And that has also resulted in no quality control errors for FY19 to date from the state, and it speaks to the work that we do here in Montgomery County when you compare us to sister jurisdictions of the same size. Training and Development Center is a great accomplishment. We have been able to conduct a number of trainings, given the limited training opportunities at the state level and the fact that the state staff have to do all 24 jurisdictions. So we have been able to successfully train and continue to train staff in our offices here in the county. And we have also engaged with the CCL here in the county to conduct additional training, not just program-specific training, but just overall career development of our staff, what to expect in the workplace. We've also partnered with the University of Maryland School of Social Work, they have conducted about 6 trainings so far, even at the beginning of this year to now. These trainings are for supervisors, our managers, our line staff, to help them in the day-to-day, because we understand it's difficult work that we do. So it's to help our staff in the development of the work that we do. Now, with our accomplishments also come challenges, and so transitioning to an electronic application process has been a challenge for not just for our customers, for our staff. And again, our Training and Development Center is poised to assist those staff who are challenged with technology, and we are trying to prepare our staff to get ready as we go into MD Think at the end of the year. And also, as we go into MD Think, is going to become a statewide work sharing process, which we are not accustomed to in Montgomery County because we have a caseload system. But again, it's our responsibility to begin to let staff know what that means and how we can help them to transition into that. So that's the work underway with myself and my management team to get staff prepared for that. Work sharing is going to start with long-term care. That's a smaller group, and so it will be helpful for us to see how that works ahead of the remainder of our staff going into a statewide workload sharing system. And so we hope to learn from whatever we get from that as our long-term care team embarks on that. And we anticipate that's going to start somewhere about April. We're supposed to start sometime last year, but the state has delayed it. So we anticipate it's going to start somewhere April or May of this year.
A quick question regarding that. So I assume that will mean a significant change to your general business practices. Having gone through a similar software and IT transition that was bumpy, we tried doing a lot of it in-house, and frankly, all things being considered, probably would have benefited from a third party coming in to help facilitate and map out that business transition plan. Are you confident that with you and your team that you've got the team in place to be able to adjust, or would you be open to, have you discussed the feasibility of bringing in a third party to help with that transition?
At this point, we have not discussed the feasibility of bringing in a third party, but I will say what we have done is visited other jurisdictions that are already in a work sharing system. And so we visited Baltimore City and Prince George's County to see how they do the work today. A training manager was hired from Howard County that also has that system, and so she has been an integral part in helping us in the development of that. Does that mean that we wouldn't need additional assistance? It really doesn't. But what it means is that we have gone out and looked at some of the practices that we've seen, and we believe that with timeliness, with training of our staff, we are able to do that. We are also looking at some of our staff who are very technology savvy, have been willing, and have been assisting other staff within their offices to help them with dealing with the system as it is today. Today, we have transitioned into the new CARES system. So that has also been a slight challenge for staff, but I would say it has been insignificant. And so I feel confident that we will be able to do it. But at the end of the day, we always want to be the best in everything we do. So, any feedback that we can get to assist us with it will be welcomed. I don't know, Joanne, if you wanted to add to that. Okay. And so I think we've talked about the hiring process already and what that means for us. So, of course, it's no surprise that it's one of our challenges that we deal with. And then an increase in turnover of our staff. This is a job that's very, very rule and regulation intensive and compliance driven. It's not a job for everyone, and people don't realize it until they come in. So you do see that, and it's really on both ends. We have an aging population who've been doing the job for the longest time in the traditional way, the paper application, the face-to-face interviews with the customers, and a lot of these people are at the stage where they are looking at retirement. So we see that, and then you have another set of people who come into the job because our positions, particularly for our caseworkers, require a college degree. It does not specify any particular major, or you have 4 years of experience, the equivalency. So a lot of people come into the job because they're looking for a job, as we well know what it means when you graduate from college. And so they may soon enough realize that this is not the job for them, and they're looking for other advancements and other opportunities. And we understand that this is not specific to Montgomery County. We see this across the nation. We see this in the other jurisdictions within the state. As a matter of fact, I think we have an advantage, and that's because of our benefits and whether it's compensation, whether it's the full package benefits, because we do get to recruit a number of other workers from other jurisdictions, and we are in the process of getting some good people from, whether it's Howard County, Frederick County, Prince George's, and other neighboring jurisdictions. We do have to rely on temporary personnel as we have vacancies, and so we do use that, and that's always a challenge because they're not permanent staff. And we also have limited multilingual materials for our customers. I will say that the state does have about 19 different languages in which written documents are. We like to see that with the county too. And then we have seen an increase in welfare avoidance grants requests, which is a good thing. It's a good thing because, as the name suggests, it avoids getting into welfare. So anything to avoid somebody getting into temporary cash assistance, we want to look at, we want to welcome, whether it's assisting them with transportation, with getting a car, with insurance for their vehicles, with uniforms. These are the things that we look at. And since we started doing this in OESS, we have seen an increase in how we can assist those customers avoid getting into welfare by providing them with some of these resources that would need to help them succeed in a new job. And a challenge that we do see is that the state is now expecting local jurisdictions to do a lot more of the tracking and trending and reporting, which is where our central unit comes in handy with quality assurance. But again, it is a challenge because now it's work that we have to do on the local end and not at the state end. And so at this time, I will take any of your other questions that you have, but in a nutshell, this is what we do in OESS.
Great. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So I want to start off with staffing issues, and I personally, through the former director, Uma Alawalia, and I have had multiple conversations about staffing in Germantown and the wait times that are there. I've been there personally and seen them myself, and I know that the automated system has certainly enhanced that. But I do know that with the continual challenges that we face in terms of requirements of what people need to have, they sometimes have to come back and forth, that it still creates a dynamic that is a challenge, and it creates frustration on both sides, both for the person who's the intake specialist as well as for the person who's looking to get the services. And so from a staffing model perspective, I certainly think that we need to continue to look at ways in which we can enhance that for you, understanding that the workload that your folks are experiencing continues to rise. And my concern is that we have this impending recession that's going to come at some point in the next year or two, and we need to be ready for that because I remember the last time that happened and how we had lines that were practically out the door as folks looked to register. I know that you guys got hit hard when it came to the federal government shutdown, and lines increased at that point in time. And I know that was more an anomaly, but I do fear that if we don't get a handle on the right staffing models for many of your locations, we'll continue to face some of those challenges. So can you just give me some feedback as to what your thoughts are in terms of with the high turnover that you have, with the specialized training that you have to have, with the influx of more things that more of your staff have to do, how that impacts and how that then is perceived to the greater community?
Yes. So clearly, I think that the less vacancies that we have, the more we are able to do, the more we are able to train staff and get them ready to do the job that needs to be done. I will say that we have also seen a slight decrease in our caseload sizes, and the Germantown office in particular is fully staffed at this time. I will also say that based on our assessments, we are doing a number of things in that office specifically as it relates to ensuring that the staff are equipped to assist the customers as they come in. We recognize that it's our largest office, and that's because it's an integrated office also. And so we do understand that. At this time, we have an acting manager in the office, and we are working alongside with our 2 regional office managers from the other 2 offices to assist the office to get up to the standard as the other 2 offices are. And so that's something we've been doing since December, and we are seeing some results there. We will be aggressively looking to hire a permanent manager for the office, and we definitely need someone who comes in with the experience and understanding of management and also how to nurture staff. And so those are things that we are working on. In addition to that, our new training manager has also been assisting the office with retraining and looking at what, as policies change, how to update these things. We have provided assistance for workers to ensure that their focus is on assisting the customer and processing applications. And so we are supporting them with administrative support staff to do some of the clearances that need to be done. Because again, with our work, you have to touch so many different systems, about 10 systems that staff have to touch. So we have ensured that they don't have to do all of those systems by providing them with that support. And I do agree that a lot more work needs to be done. And as we move from the caseload model to the workload sharing model, we have to begin to prepare staff. It's not just about the work that has to be done, it's about the changing of mindsets, because the roles are going to be different. We understand every day that our work is going to become more of an educator, a coach, a counselor, as opposed to just determining eligibility for the residents. And that's because there's going to be that shift where residents are going to have to be doing more of this for themselves, and then they're going to have to rely on our staff to guide them through that process, as we are seeing. I think the benefits for us is having the experience with Maryland Health Connection, because that's the type of system that it has. And so with that, we are using that to help us inform how we're going to move into this model for our cases as it relates to income supports.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Councilor McGlass.
Curious about the decrease in the caseload as you described it, and whether any of that has to do with President Trump and the public charge rule, trying to keep immigrants and certain members of the community from not accessing certain government services. Have you seen that in play at all?
I will say that, I get this question a lot. And to date, we have not seen a trend in that direction. What we have seen over the past few years is the slight reduction in our caseloads we could well attribute to people getting employment, people working, and being able to assist those customers with temporary cash assistance into jobs. Now, I will say though, during the period where a lot of the rumors or whatever was coming from the current administration, we did have a few applicants or people who were receiving benefits who had contacted us and wanted to close their cases. I will not say that's a significant number, but I will say what we did was educate people that we continued to follow the guidelines for the programs that we do. We were not immigration, we were not ICE, and that people should have no fear about applying for benefits that they are eligible for. So we continue to hammer on that message, and I think that's the reason why it was not we did not see a significant impact to that.
I'm heartened to hear that you take time and resources to educate people, that we here in Montgomery County are providing these resources for everybody, regardless of their status. So thank you for that.
Great, just a couple comments or questions. So you mentioned the anticipation of a number of retirements in the near future, and so are you going through a formal succession planning process to prepare? And I suspect the transition to the new system may lead to even more retirements. How are you planning on preparing for that?
Yes, indeed, and that's something that I have to think of every day. I know Joanne thinks about it. We all do, managers and supervisors. In fact, I know a few of the supervisors, my supervisors, who will be retiring at the end of June, and so this is one reason why we are doing an insurmountable amount of training, because we want to make sure staff are trained, staff are equipped, staff understand what the roles are. We are also looking at staff who are volunteering to do some of these things, not waiting to be called on, but people who show that they want to and they can. And so this is how you can build on your succession. This is how you can train. We are making sure my central unit manager is teaching and mentoring, supervisor, the people in her units, to make sure that they understand what the job is about, what these little intricacies are that you will not know if you're not sitting in that position. And so we continue to do that. Is it a challenge? Absolutely, because you don't always have a full staffing load to make sure that you have time to be doing these things. But to the extent that we find any opportunity to do that, we do that. That's why it's so critical that we have our vacancies all filled, because we want to make sure that we have people to step into these positions as people are stepping out, whether it's retirement, whether they choose to leave for any other reason, that we are able to fill in those. So a lot of training is happening. This year, one of our priorities for OESS is to do this type of training to help build our pool of staff who will be able to take on these new responsibilities.
So let me just make a broad statement. You don't have to respond, but I know the county executive has spoken often about wanting to go through a formal reorganization process within county government, which I respect and I understand. And it sounds like we're moving in the direction of more automation in this important space. But I would stress to the executive branch the need for the personal connection of the clients. And I'm so happy that you referred to this as customer service. And while I know there will be with so many potential retirements, it will be tempting to eliminate some of those positions. And I, for one, as chair of this committee, will be looking closely and will be asking many questions if there are any positions proposed for elimination. And so it's more of a statement than a comment, than a question, but I just want to put that on the record. Final thing for now is, given more than a third of our county residents speak English as a second language, and there's so many interesting dynamics within each families, do you do in-house culture training, or do you, and what does that look like? We're looking at our work through a racial equity lens moving forward, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about best practices within existing agencies that disproportionately see a lot of minority communities. So how do you handle that cultural competency training within your shop?
Yes, so what we have done over the past year and continue to do, the one big thing, and I do want to state that when we talk about cultural sensitivity, it's not just about our external customers, it's also about our internal customers among ourselves. And so when you look at the staff makeup within OESS, it's a very, very diverse staff, beginning from me as the senior administrator of OESS, all the way down to, our line staff. And so we do have those challenges. We do have to talk about them, and sometimes they're not the most pleasant of things that people want to talk about, but we don't want to ignore them. We want to address them so everybody understands that everybody has a place in the space. And so one of the things that we've embarked on with the our local union is the sensitivity training for staff. And we've had some of the sessions. We still have to continue to make sure everybody gets through that training. And within that training, it allows people to be able to share experiences. It allows the people to be able to understand the things from the other person's point of view, from the other side of the desk, and how you can come to a meeting of the minds to be respectful to everybody, and understanding what may be offensive to somebody, even though it's not offensive to the next person. And so we are working on doing that. That's one training we're doing in conjunction with the union, but we are also offering other trainings for our staff from our partners with the School of Social Work, so that staff are becoming more acclimated and understanding. We deal with these individual issues as they come in. We talk to staff, we counsel, we coach, so that everybody understands what what it means. And so that's, again, the charity has to begin at home, so that we understand it within ourselves, so that we are able to take that on to the customers that we serve. We ensure that our materials are in other languages. We provide, as I said earlier, the language line to be able to assist customers as they come. We don't want to make anyone feel that they don't belong in that space because they speak a different language. And even if you don't speak a different language, but maybe the accent may be different. So we are very, very well aware of those things. And again, repeatedly, it's a matter of reinforcement with staff, so that they understand what it means to be all-inclusive with the people we work with.
Great, thank you. Ms. Barnes?
I'd just like to add to that, our internal HHS Office of Community Affairs under Betty Lamb has a equity program that it's a peer program where we have peer trainers, and OESS staff and managers have taken advantage of that training as well. And talking about viewing things from the other side of the desk, we are responsible for manning shelters and family reunification as part of our emergency response. And OESS staff are also involved in the training and response to that, which I think gives them an opportunity to get out from behind their typical desk situation and understand some of the circumstances that our families are experiencing.
That's important. Thank you. One last suggestion for now is we participate in a training called racial equity training through an organization called REI, and I strongly encourage you to look into it. The executive branch and the county executive participated in part of that training, and I think your office and this particular agency in particular would benefit from hearing more about that. Thank you very much for your time today. Appreciate it.